Hey, van lifers, here's a story about a breakdown because a repair or upgrade was rushed, and also about how that it may actually is one of the best upgrades I think to make on your van, and also a review on some really good gelato. So, this is really a story about not finishing up that upgrade and then causing a breakdown sometime on your road trip. Probably one of your worst nightmares. First time it's ever happened to me, first time I broke down in my van, and it was absolutely frightening. So let me tell you a little more about it. So, first of all, I love to get out there and get out in the middle of nowhere. And in order to do that, you really do need a lot of fuel. Sometimes where I live, at least about 300 to 400 miles worth of range from the nearest fuel station. So I went ahead and added the Agile 28 gallon spare tire carrier located fuel tank, and that auxiliary fuel tank enabled me to go from 24 gallons of factory fuel to 52 gallons, really increasing the range of the Sprinter from about 350 miles to well over 750 miles. A fantastic upgrade and really enabled me to do some really great trips. However, in the process of doing that upgrade, I had a little bit of an issue in that, for whatever reason, the fuel wasn't quite transferring from the auxiliary fuel tank to the main fuel tank, and I just couldn't quite figure out why, and or actually in the reverse direction. And so I had to drop the fuel tank and try to create this repair because I had some leaking around the top of the fuel tank and along the side of it, and that just was very frustrating to me, and collecting all this dirt when I go down dirt roads. And so right before this big trip, this almost 2 week long trip that was going to go through a bunch of remote areas, I decided I am going to drop the main fuel tank once again and take off that main cap, which ended up having an O-ring in it that was slightly ajar in the wrong, just a little bit off, and that was what causing a leak. And also I could fix that, but also figure out why I couldn't get fuel pumped from the main tank to the auxiliary fuel tank. Now, it turned out to be this little pickup tube here that the threads came loose, and it lowered down and fell down inside of the main tank. And so I was able to go ahead and get that repaired and fixed and get the O-ring on there right. And I was feeling quite proud of myself to have both those things fixed, and all in the rush of getting off on this road trip the next day. Which, let me tell you, as a first piece of advice, don't do that. Take your time, get the repairs done, the maintenance done. Doesn't mean you can't leave on your road trip. Either delay those repairs or maintenance till you get back, but ideally try to get them done beforehand and make sure they're done right. And so that's probably my first piece of advice, other than adding more additional fuel capacity to your Sprinter or other vehicle if you like to go or travel in these remote regions. Nonetheless, in the process of re-clipping the electrical wires that go to the fuel tank pump and sender at the top of the tank, which is a very precarious little clip that Mercedes makes, it cracked, and hence the clip wouldn't really lock into place, but it held and everything worked. And so I started up the van and I went on my road trip, and I was feeling quite proud of myself to having my 52 gallons of fuel available to me, and really enjoying that while driving through these remote regions with very expensive fuel, and also exploring some remote dirt roads. However, obviously the washboard roads and all that did end up causing a little bit of an issue, and as I fortunately in this case was happened to be back on a paved road pulling into a small town in the eastern Sierras of California, the Sprinter conked out, and I knew exactly what it was. It was not getting fuel sent. So I had to crawl down underneath the van in this very hot, dusty area and figure out how to get this little electrical clip to stay. So, I'm fairly prepared in that I carry a bag of zip ties and some duct tape. Certainly something I suggest that all of you also carry, and a few basic small tools. And I went ahead and I wrapped some zip ties around that clip. I also wrapped some duct tape around it and got it to hold. And lo and behold, it took me another about 300 miles down into LA, and I traveled down into Southern California and spent some time on the coast down by San Diego and Orange County, and I was able to take care of a couple of business things as well as visit with some friends and family along the way. However, here I am leaving Orange County and on this very busy, smaller highway where the speed limit's 50 miles an hour, and I pull up to a stoplight and I stop at that stoplight. And here alongside me pulls up these Ferraris and Lamborghinis and some Porsches and a lot of other vehicles, of course. I happen to be in the middle of 3 lanes at this stoplight, and the Sprinter conks out again. And I know exactly what it is. I go to try to restart it, and I do not hear the fuel pump whine that you can barely hear from inside the van. Did not hear that. I know it ran out of fuel. And so, previously, the fuel tank sender wasn't working, meaning the electrical connection wasn't really all that strong after my roadside repair previously, but it kept enough electrical connection to operate the fuel pump. So that was great until now. And now all of a sudden, here I am stuck in the middle lane at this stoplight, in the pole position at the stoplight, with cars on both sides zooming away from this traffic light as it turns green. And here I am stuck in my Sprinter. I put my hazard lights on. Cars come up from behind me at high speed, not really recognizing I'm stopped in the middle of this road, even though I have my hazard lights on. And they zoom past me at high speed. And so I really can't get out of the Sprinter to actually conduct this repair until the light turns red. And when it turns red, I go ahead and I crawl under there and I look up in there, and it's really hard to see, and it's hard to get a hand up in there where this electrical connector is at the top of the fuel tank. But nonetheless, I do my best to try to squeeze a little kind of candy box in there that I happened to find on the side of the road, and see if that'll hold. It was just about the right size. I couldn't get it to hold, and couldn't. I had to keep waiting for the light to turn red before I could crawl back out from underneath the van. Now that cars are stopped at the light, go back in the van, try restarting it, and repeat this pattern for about 5 or 6 times as I'm sitting dangerously inside the van, watching cars zoom around me at the last minute, and then waiting again for the traffic light to turn red so that I could crawl back underneath on this hot roadway and try to conduct this repair. And after several times of trying and getting dirty and hot and risking life and limb under there, I'm looking around inside the van at the next red light and for something, or next green light, for something to prop in there. And what can I find? I find a Talenti jar, this great gelato. If you ever never had any, it's fantastic. In this case, pistachio is wonderful. And the lid, it looked a little bit too big, but I figured I might be able to bend it and squeeze it in a position to hold this electrical connector in place. So after several tries and a couple more red light cycles, I was able to bend this with all my might. With the one hand, I could barely get in there, and a couple of fingers up above the fuel tank between there and the frame rails, and squeeze this Talenti container lid and literally rotate it into position, as it has these knurled edges. And so I was able to rotate it into position and really compress this electrical connector up against the fuel tank connection, and it held. I got back in the van, I turned that starter key, and I hear the little whir of the fuel pump, and I am thrilled. And I not only hear the whir of the fuel pump, but I rotate the key, and the engine starts up, and it comes to life. And I am just so thrilled, but scared to death that it's going to go out again. And so I quickly, pull away as a light turns green with the rest of the vehicles, turn my hazard lights off, and I'm so relieved and yet sweaty, tired, and dirty from rolling around on the pavement trying to get this repair fixed for the last 20 minutes or so. So I proceed up to LA on freeways, staying all the way to the right lane as much as I possibly can, but it really didn't matter because there are no emergency lanes or to pull off of. All the freeways I was on were under construction, so those big Jersey concrete barriers are right up against the lane. I'm thinking, boy, this would be terrible to break down here. But meanwhile, I have to proceed And as I'm proceeding, I just turn off the radio, I turn off my podcast or books on tape that I was listening to, and I just simply focus on exactly what's going on with the van and the traffic to make sure that I am ready to quickly react in the event that something happens and this thing fails once again. Meanwhile, I go ahead and I look up Mercedes dealers, and I look for where they are, and I call them up, and I call up every Mercedes dealer that was on my pathway between Orange County and LA, and ask, do you have this electrical wire, that connects from the top of the fuel tank? And every one of them said, no, they do not. So I said, okay, let me go ahead and get to my next meeting up in LA. I did get to my meeting, and I finished my meeting. And when I was done, I went ahead out into the van and I called up all these dealers and found out where one was available. Well, fortunately, there was not just one available. There were actually two available in the whole entire United States. One in New Jersey, one in South Carolina, both over 3,000 miles away. And both at this time of day now, a 2-day delivery schedule before they would arrive to me. Well, I was not prepared nor wanting to sit in LA and camp out there in my van for 2 days just simply for this cable to arrive. So I was going to take my chance that this Talenti container lid was going to hold, and it was going to hold this wire in place until I arrived at my next destination about 500 miles to the north. And that way I could spend those next 2 days visiting with family for the first time since the beginning of the COVID pandemic. So over a year since I was able to see my mom. And so I was able to go visit her, spend a couple days with her while this cable got shipped from the East Coast over to the West Coast and to the nearest Mercedes dealer. And at which time I, after spending those couple of days with my mom, which were quite wonderful, went to the dealer and purchased this new cable and was able to easily then insert it, have it clip into place, and voila, I was secure and back to good as new. And here's a picture actually of the new cable in place, and then also this old cable with the actual knurled edges you can see on this wire after it was removed. The moral of the story is several things. One, once again, eat good gelato. Talenti is excellent. Two, always keep a container of it in your vehicle, along with some duct tape and zip ties and some basic tools. In this case, one of the tools I needed was some long, extended needle nose pliers. Probably not something I would normally keep in the van, but a little more of a tools would certainly be beneficial in this case. The other really big moral of the story is to, again, not rush those repairs or maintenance or upgrades. Make sure they're done right. If something breaks or doesn't go right, get it fixed, and ideally delay your trip before you drive away with some sort of little hack or something that isn't quite right. Now that's ideal. We all know we have trips planned. There's limited schedules and times to get these kinds of repairs or upgrades done before we have to go on those trips, and we all want to go off on those trips. They are wonderful. They keep us happy and alive and keep our adventure spirit engaged. But as much as you can, try to repair these things before you leave. And if for whatever reason you do break down, whether it's on the side of the road or in the middle of the road, as happened in my case, be safe, be thoughtful, think through how to keep yourself safe, as I did by planning out when to hop out of my vehicle, when to hop back in during those red lights, and really try to keep yourself as safe as possible, and think about what resources you have available to as in the tools you have, the spare parts like zip ties and duct tape, even the Talenti container or whatever other things you may have on hand that might be able to conduct this field repair. And then certainly, of course, reach out to others that can help. In this case, the Mercedes dealers, the person at my meeting that I met with did actually help me out and gave me some kind of nylon straps that he had laying around. They thought maybe this might help, and unfortunately they didn't work, but they at least were something that I could try and I could take with me in the event that I had to do another roadside repair, that they might have been able to do something to help and keep my vehicle moving until I could get to a dealer and get this repaired. And so those are all things to think through, and in order to make sure you keep safe, avoid these kinds of problems, but inevitably when you do come across them, you're able to get it through it. And then of course, when you do fix that repair, make sure you go and replace that Talenti with another container of it in your favorite flavor or other snack or food, to make sure you have some on hand for the next time this happens. You can certainly have a nice, relaxing, cool down and celebratory drink or eats after this event. So with that, certainly I want to make sure that if you haven't seen my video on the auxiliary fuel tank, that upgrade that I made, make sure you go take a look at that. That was published back in April. And it certainly will give you tips on this auxiliary fuel tank, as well as also subscribe for my other videos that I have on lots of other tips and upgrades that I've made on my van that may be very useful to you. And by all means, get out there, enjoy, and not just enjoy some good adventures in your van, but also make sure you always keep some good food on hand for those celebrations when you do get to your destination safely and sound. Thanks for watching, and look forward to presenting some more great information in my next video.